The trilateral peace talks in the Ukraine-Russia-United States format have been postponed to next week at the request of the American side. Volodymyr Zelensky told journalists about this. According to him, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council is in contact with representatives of the United States regarding this matter. A decision regarding the date and location of the next round of negotiations is expected to be made in the near future.
Regarding the status of our ongoing negotiations, the official talks were originally scheduled to be held this coming Tuesday and Wednesday within the Republic of Turkey. I have just finished a detailed conversation with the President, Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan. For all of them, war in the Middle East is also a challenge. Nevertheless, everyone says that dialogue about ending the war in Ukraine is important and a priority for all of us. That is why we were ready to go to Turkey. It was the American side that postponed this meeting, rescheduled it, and said, let's do it next week. We expect the meeting to take place next week. The meeting could be held in Switzerland or in Turkey. I doubt it will be in the Emirates.
In temporarily occupied Mariupol, a Russian ammunition depot was hit. Explosions occurred during the night of March 11th. Local public pages posted numerous videos of the fire. You can hear the sounds of ammunition detonating in the footage. According to eyewitness reports, the detonation lasted at least half an hour. Open-source investigators determined that the destroyed enemy depot was located in the area of the airfield. And the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine confirmed the success of the missile strike on the Bryansk microelectronics plant Kremny EL. For the attack, the Ukrainian army used air-launched Storm Shadow missiles. The strike on the facility and the significant damage to its production capacities were also confirmed by Volodymyr Zelensky. The extent of the damage is still being clarified. The Kremny EL plant produces electronic components that are used in various weapon systems and military equipment. These are primarily missile systems, air defense systems, and drones, as well as electronic warfare equipment and radar stations. According to Russian telegram channels, one of the missiles also hit the plant's assembly workshop. Local social media pages report that this workshop suffered the most serious damage. Residents of Bryansk are also sharing videos showing missiles striking the administrative buildings of the enterprise. Important information about the enemy, specifically about their losses, was obtained by Ukrainian intelligence. Volodymyr Zelensky shared this on social media after meeting with the head of the main intelligence directorate, Ole Ivashchenko. It is reported that changes have been recorded in the ratio of losses among Russian occupation forces, according to classified documents from the aggressor country's army. Specifically, out of 100% of losses, 62% are killed and 38% are wounded. The president has not yet explained what the change in the ratio consists of, but he noted that according to our intelligence, the Russians themselves, in classified official reports, estimate their losses during the full-scale war at 1,315,000 killed and severely wounded. At the same time, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine currently estimates enemy losses at approximately 1,274,000 killed and wounded. For the first time since her election, the president of the German Bundestag, Julia Klöckner, has arrived in Ukraine. At the central railway station, she was met by the chairman of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, Ruslan Stefanchuk. He shared photos on his social media and noted that this visit is yet another signal of solidarity with Ukraine and support for Kiev at the highest parliamentary level. Let me remind you, Germany has become the fourth largest arms supplier in the world, surpassing even China. A significant portion of the arsenal and equipment has come specifically to us. Overall, official Berlin began actively assisting Ukraine in the spring of 2022. Among other things, we have received modern air defense systems, armored vehicles, artillery, and ammunition. It was also recently reported that Germany has assembled another batch of Patriot missiles for Ukraine. The veto by Orban and Fico regarding the €19 billion loan to Ukraine will not work. At least that is what the EU is hoping for, and they have reportedly already found a way to provide $30 billion, according to Politico. The leaders of the European Union will still meet at a summit in Brussels next week to persuade Hungarian Prime Minister Orban and his Slovak counterpart Fico to keep their promise and approve the loan. However, a Plan B proposed by the Baltic and Northern European countries is already in place to keep Ukraine afloat during the first half of this year. The total amount under consideration is €30 billion. Since these are bilateral loans, they will not require EU approval. Despite promises to support the approval of the loan, Orban and Fico consistently threatened to block any aid to Ukraine, including financial assistance. Currently, the main argument being used is the situation surrounding the Druzhba oil pipeline. North Korea. Kim watched the launch on a screen, likely from the command center, and together with his daughter, whom he reportedly recently appointed to a key position in the Missile Armament Administration. And now more details about the 36 Patriot missiles that Germany has collected for Ukraine. This fact was reported by Spiegel. Kyiv is expected to receive the interceptor missiles in the coming weeks. Germany's defense minister Boris Pistorius managed to gather reinforcements for Ukraine's air defense among European partners and allies. Together with the German contribution from Bundeswehr reserves, this amounts to about 35 units in total. This initiative was discussed on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. At that time, Pistorius put forward a proposal that Germany would provide 5 Patriot missiles to replenish Ukraine's stockpiles if other partners could find another 30. In addition, Berlin will also supply Ukraine with other systems and weapons, such as portable NMANS anti-aircraft missile systems, air-to-air missiles, and guided missiles for Iris-T launchers. As for the Patriot missiles, there are concerns because they may become scarce, since in the first days of the conflict in the Middle East, Israel and its allies used about 800 missiles against Iran. Meanwhile, Ukraine has received only 600 of them throughout the entire period of the full-scale war. They may lose funding because of their affection for Russians. The European Commission has threatened to withdraw grant funds from the Venice Biennale if Moscow is allowed to set up its pavilion at this year's exhibition. The scandal erupted after it became known that for the first time since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russians would be allowed to participate in the Venice Festival. Kyiv called on the organizers to reconsider the decision, reminding them of the principled stance taken by the West in previous years. Our country is particularly concerned by information about the declared commissioner of the Russian pavilion having ties to the military-industrial complex of the aggressor state. The European Commission recalled the EU's common position to uphold sanctions and not to provide a platform to individuals who actively support the Kremlin's aggression against Ukraine. Culture, they say, should never be used as a platform for propaganda. This is emphasized in Brussels, and they say if the Venice Biennale does invite Russians, it could lose its funding. The United Marathon broadcast continues. You're with Channel 1+1 and the news from TSN. They brought down the house with applause in Moscow. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine has responded to a series of anti-Ukrainian decisions by Hungary. The diplomatic agency commented on the resolution of the Hungarian parliament refusing to support our country's accession to the EU, as well as the government decree in the scandalous case of the cash couriers. Budapest is essentially sending a signal to the Hungarian minority in Ukraine and is closing the door to the EU right in front of them, Kyiv emphasizes. The adoption by Hungarian parliamentarians of a resolution stating that they do not support our country's European integration and further military funding for Ukraine was not a surprise, since the disgraceful positions of the Hungarian authorities have long been known, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says. Budapest is playing the role of the EU's Trojan horse, and such actions are in line with Russian policy. The resolution adopted by the Hungarians has no legal consequences for Ukraine's European integration, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs reminds, so this is purely a political move ahead of the elections. The government decree and law adopted by Hungary, which are intended to legalize the seizure of funds from Ukraine's Oshched Bank, have also been described as political. Let me remind you, this concerns the money and gold that the Hungarians seized last week from armored vehicles transporting them from Austria to Kyiv. Ukraine will pursue full legal accountability and justice, using every available national and international legal mechanism and instrument, as our leading diplomats continue to emphasize. And Orban and Fico's veto on the 90 billion euros loan to Ukraine will not work. At least that's what the EU is hoping for, and they have reportedly already found a way to provide 30 billion, according to Politico. The leaders of the European Union will still meet at a summit in Brussels next week to persuade Hungarian Prime Minister Orban and his Slovak counterpart Fico to keep their promise and approve the loan. However, a plan B, proposed by the Baltic and Northern European countries, already exists to keep Ukraine afloat during the first half of this year. The total amount under consideration is 30 billion euros. Since these are bilateral loans, they will not require EU approval. Despite promises to support the approval of the loan, Orban and Fico consistently threaten to block any aid to Ukraine, including financial assistance. Currently, the main argument being used is the situation surrounding the Druzhba oil pipeline.
Ukraine holds some trump cards, and now everyone acknowledges this. President Volodymyr Zelensky, in an interview with Irish blogger Cowlan Robertson, stated, "The fact that the United States turned specifically to Ukraine for help in countering Iranian Shaheds demonstrates Ukraine's unique combat experience and capabilities. The work of the armed forces of Ukraine and the growth of defense potential are attracting more and more attention from around the world." The president shared that it is a good feeling, but emphasized that, in fact, Ukraine already had these trump cards a year ago. It just didn't show them. The president also warned that escalation in the Middle East could turn into a protracted war with global consequences and could even lead to a third world war, for which the world is not prepared. At the same time, countries in the region are increasingly understanding the threat that Ukraine is facing. After all, for a long time, due to economic relations with Russia, they tried to maintain a balance, but now they realize who the aggressor is and what it means to live under constant attacks. According to the Wall Street Journal, Saudi Arabia is considering the possibility of a large-scale purchase of Ukrainian drones. Meanwhile, Ukraine is already helping its partners. At the request of Middle Eastern countries, Kyiv has sent 3 professional, fully equipped teams of specialists to Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia to strengthen the protection of American military bases. Another Ukrainian team has gone to Jordan. Along with the military, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov, also traveled to the Middle East.
Right now, our team, which includes both military personnel and Rustem Umerov, is on its way to the Gulf region, where our guys can help protect lives and stabilize the situation. It is the right perspective to be with us in drone production and deployment. And now everyone sees that there is no alternative to this perspective. Ukraine has the world's greatest experience in countering strike drones. And without our experience, it will be very difficult for the Gulf region, the entire Middle East, and our partners in Europe and America to build strong defenses.